All right, I think we'll get started with the next presentation here. Excited to be here, grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit. Hope this goes okay. So I'm Trevor Petersen. I'm from Oregon Tech, and I'm going to talk a little about another area of wellness, kind of a recipe for how we can create more joy, find more meaning, and increase our life satisfaction. And I'm calling this overlap. So, move on. So just a little bit of background. I've been working on this concept for about a decade. As a kid, I was pretty shy and a bit introverted, and so that kind of became a barrier for me being able to connect well with other people. And so I had anxiety, right? There's these inhibitions. Sometimes I'd get sad and depressed. And maybe like many kids, I thought I was different, right? I thought I was a bit weird and wondered what was wrong with me. And so at a very young age, this kind of informal quest to find happiness began. Like, how do I find more contentment, satisfaction with my life? And then I got older and I started doing some reading and got into psychology and started realizing, oh my goodness, I'm not alone. The vast majority of people, 1 out of 2 people in their lifetime, develop a full-fledged psychological disorder. And millions of people are depressed, have anxiety. It's growing across our country. Many people are suicidal. So I realized that it was all of humanity, actually, that has this struggle with being content with their life and wanting to be a little bit happier. So that began my formal quest to try to figure this out. And I got a degree in psychology and some degrees in clinical psychology and started doing a lot of reading about this and traveling. And I finally, after years of gathering data, looking at the articles, looking at the research, reading books, I was able to go on a sabbatical. So I went to Ecuador and had some time to really pull this together and try to figure it out. My goal was to take all that happiness theories, the happiness activities, and try to distill it down to, what is like the common denominator? Like, what's the actual mechanism by which happiness is created? And it took time, right? And I kind of gathered and distilled, but eventually something emerged, right, from kind of the fog. There's all this complexity, but there's this kind of simple thing that seemed to be consistent across all these things that created this constellation, and I'm going to call it overlap. So,
take a few steps to your right, please.
Okay.
You're sitting out of frame.
Am I good now? Even more? Okay. All right. Perfect. So I looked at a lot of research. I'm not going to go over this now, but you can advance the next couple slides. There's just a lot, right? There's thousands of articles that have been done on different activities, different theories about how we find, joy, meaning, life satisfaction. And a lot of it was shared by Josh just a second ago. So you can advance again one more time. And so all of this I'm going to try to capture in this word overlap. So here's an analogy to try to explain what I mean. When I was a kid, probably around 9, my family saved some money and we flew across the country from Washington State to Florida to visit my uncle. And it's my favorite uncle because he spoils us. But we drove down to the Florida Keys and we went to a beach, right? And when I got out of the car, I'm from the West, and beaches are cold in the West. And so this was just so exciting to go to a warm beach, tropical beach. So we get out, we're kind of getting settled. And I start to notice these different groups of people, right? There's, first off, these group of people who are still in their cars, just rushing past all these beautiful beaches. And I'm kind of shocked. I'm like, I traveled across the world basically to get here to enjoy this beach. And you're just rushing past. Kind of surprising as a young kid. And then I noticed others, they were just sitting on the beach, right? They just had their beach chairs out, they were relaxing, reclining, and just kind of spectating at what was going on. And then there was a third group that was kind of, walking along the edge of the water, waiting, getting their feet wet, maybe up to their ankles. And then I looked out a ways, and there was these people who had put the right gear on, some snorkeling gear, and they were diving down underneath the surface, exploring these reefs that were just teeming with plant and animal life, fish and colors and textures and movement, and just discovering just this grandeur of creation, right, underneath the water. And finally, we got our gear on and we went out and did the same thing. And it was life-changing. It was just this amazing experience. I didn't know all that stuff even existed. I was just blown away, right, by all the variety and the diversity and the substance, right, that was found underneath the water. And so this, in hindsight, reflecting on this contributes to this concept. So if you'll advance again, to these 4 levels of engagement with life, right? We have different ways that we can engage with the living things all around us. And the first level is passing, right? And this is what the people in the cars were doing. They were missing it. They were just rushing past these opportunities to connect deeply with living things in their life. They just kind of missed the opportunity. And there's, of course, good reasons why we may have to rush past certain things. We can't stop and engage with everything. But if we have this consistent pattern of walking past our dog, right? Not petting our dog, not playing with our dog, being too busy to interact with our children, right? Getting home too late to interact with our spouse, being too busy to interact with our colleagues. There's a point where we're missing life. Like we're missing the living things, the vitality of life. And we're passing it. We're not engaging. And we're not going to experience the same type of joy, meaning, and life satisfaction that we can if we do stop and do something different. So the next level is spectating. So these are the people on the shore. They're watching, they're observing, and there's some joy in this, right? There's beauty in the sunset and in the water. But they're still missing a depth, right? That can come with deeper levels of engagement with life. So this is kind of like the difference between, watching the ball game, sitting in the stands versus being in the game, being on the court and having the full experience. So it's moving towards overlap, but we're not quite there yet. The third level is waiting. So this is where we're actually starting to connect a little bit with living things. We're starting to dabble, you could say, but we're still not quite there. So this might be late at night, you're on your bed, on your phone, scrolling through Pinterest, and you make occasional comment to your partner, but mostly you're distracted, right? So there is a little bit of a connection there, but it's not the full depth of what's possible. And so as you can imagine, that's not going to create as much joy or meaning as a deep conversation about things you both really care about. So the final level is what I'm calling overlap. This is the ultimate level of engagement with life. This is where you are all in, you prepare yourself in all the ways necessary to dive under the water, to fully engage in as deep and rich and meaningful of a relationship as possible with another living thing. And these living things could be your partner, could be your child, it could be your colleague, could be your pet, could be wisdom, right? Music, art, literature, could be nature, some beautiful plants here. There's just all these living things that surround us that if we engage with, will drive so much joy and pleasure from that we won't, right, if we're interacting mostly with non-living things or dead things. And I'll define what I mean by living things here in a second. So if we can advance. So here's my definition for overlap. This is complete engagement with what is alive in our lives. So this is when we slow down, we open up, we dive in, and we courageously interact and connect. We give and receive with other highly living things in such a meaningful and celebratory way that we are inspired, energized, and positively transformed by the process. So that's a lot, but there's quite a few things that can happen when we do this well. And I'm going to give you the recipe for how to actually overlap here in a second. So this is something you could consider this a dynamic communion with another living thing. There's an interchange, right? There's energy being transferred as you're having this experience. And this is how we can live, right, in the ultimate way possible. You can advance. So living things is used very loosely, right? I'm not just talking about like organic, this is anything that has life to it, right? That has substance to it, that has depth to it, something that can offer you gifts in return, right? And these things could be gifts of, wisdom or companionship or support or awe or inspiration or motivation, information, right? Beauty, love. There's so many things in our life that offer these things in abundance if we slow down, if we connect, and if we interact with them in a way that we can receive the gifts that they're offering. So here's an example, right, of kind of the different levels of engagement with life. And in my own life, I'll be a little bit personal here. So I've got a few kids, as some of you know, and at night, right, there's different ways I can engage with them with the nighttime routine. So if I take like a passing approach with putting my kids to bed at night, what would I do, right? I would probably get home late. I'd be eating dinner as they're getting ready. I would probably just go into my room, go to bed, hope that they find their way to their beds eventually, and I would miss any sort of opportunity with them, right? I would pass by. So that's the lowest level. That's really non-engagement, right? I've just kind of missed any chance for connection. And then I could spectate, right? I could maybe stay downstairs and watch them start to wander around and maybe make a comment here or there, but mostly just kind of observe them doing their thing at night and at least be a little more engaged. I could wade in the experience. Maybe I go upstairs and make a comment here or there, but again, mostly let them do their thing and find their way. Or I could overlap, right? And if I choose to overlap, the experience that could be very frustrating and annoying, like just get to bed, I'm tired, could become this beautiful, wonderful moment, right? Sorry, I'm getting emotional. So this is where I could do something different, right? I could slow down and say, you know, these are living things. These are human beings that are amazing, right? I mean, they're just these profound, incredible life forms that belong to me, right? Or part of my family, and I could slow down and I could maybe take a child. We could go into the living room and put my arm around them, and we could sit down and read a book together, right? And we could talk about their day, could tell them why I love them. And think of the difference, right? If we do this consistently, what's possible, like with our kids, with our spouse, right? If we spend the time to connect every night for 20 minutes, to talk, to interact, to connect at a deeper level, to learn new things about them, like the joy, the meaning that comes from overlap, right? And it's not that hard. It doesn't really even take that much more time. It just takes intentional effort to engage, right? As deeply as we can. All right. So here's an example. Here's a woman, we'll call her Jill. She's had a busy day at work, right? She's gotten off. She's going to go pick up her kid at childcare. She's exhausted. She just wants to be done with her day. But here's how she could overlap, right? So I'll just kind of read this for you. So she goes to pick up her 4-year-old son. She gets to the curb. Instead of just texting the childcare worker to say, send my kid out, she parks the car. She goes in, she sees her kid playing on the floor, and she lets go, right, of her worries in the moment, her to-do list. She mindfully walks into that room. She sits down on the floor with her kid. She shifts her full attention to her son. She gives him a hug and a kiss on the head. She sits down with him, puts him on her lap. She gets on his level, looks in his eyes, tickles him. He tickles her back. They hug, they squeeze. She checks in on how his day is. They look into each other's eyes. She listens with great detail to what he's telling her, the highlights. You know, she raises her eyebrows, she winks. She's animated, she's responsive to what he's telling her, and this becomes a beautiful moment that energizes her. She feels life coming out of her child, like she feels his love, and she receives amazing gifts, right, from spending the moment required to engage here. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting emotional. Like I am a clinical psychologist. And so this is kind of a tender subject for me. I work with a lot of clients who struggle with their parenting, right? And they struggle to enjoy the parenting process. And this is part of the cure, right? Is to learn to overlap with your child in a way that it's a beautiful experience. There's still the frustrations and the difficulties, but sometimes we're passing by our kids, right? We're spectating at them. You know, they're playing in the park and we're always watching. We're not getting up and joining those activities and doing the steps necessary to become part of that relationship. Okay. So here are some benefits. Joy, right? 2 minutes? Okay. Wow, I have a lot to go. When I define happiness, I use 3 main parts. Regular joy, right? Joy is a primary emotion. It comes to us when our psychological needs and our physical needs are met. So when our needs for social connection are met, joy tends to surface. It's a signal saying, hey, guess what? An important need was just satisfied for you. It can come when we contribute to someone else. It can come when we find meaning in life. So joy is going to come as you do things like overlap, which connect you in deep ways. Meaning, right? We have more meaning in our life with stronger relationships, with more connections with nature, with our pets, right? With wisdom, with all these awesome opportunities. And satisfaction, we tend to be more content when we have a life full of these deep relationships. So, continue. Discovery, diversity, right? There's just so much like that experience, diving into the ocean and really just connecting with what was there and absorbing it all led to, just enlightenment and energy and elevation, this sense of being inspired and wanting to kind of enhance my life, like self-realize even. This is a picture when we were in Ecuador in the Amazon, and here's my daughter, right, trying to overlap with nature and soaking it all in. And it was so joyous, right, to be in a place where you could appreciate it through all your senses. Okay. So here's the quick recipe. I've got maybe a minute to cover this. So overlapping is the acronym that you can think of for each of the ingredients to overlap. So the first one is you got to open up, right? You got to be willing to step outside your comfort zone and engage in a new type of relationship with people, with nature, with others, to do something new, right? It may be awkward for you to give your kid a hug. It may be awkward to read a book with them. It may be awkward to have a deeper conversation with your spouse. or your colleague, but this is what it takes. You have to open up and venture with courage into something new and rewarding. You also have to value the things around you, right? If we devalue all the living things around us, we won't think they're worth overlapping with. We won't invest in those relationships. So we have to see through new eyes, right? And realize there is so much worth and potential and wisdom and gifts in everyone around me, in nature, in pets, in all of these things. And when we see with new eyes, like we're living in like this tropical paradise, right? We're just like surrounded by abundant living things. I mean, look at all of these human beings in this room that have amazing stories, that have all these talents and strengths we could get to know and overlap with, that would just come incredibly enrich our lives if we have the courage to venture and open up and maybe just talk to them. Empathy is huge, right? For us to have the type of interaction that's the most rewarding when we overlap, we have to understand others, understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they need, so we can be responsive and we can also give them what they need. So it's this reciprocal relationship. We need to relish, really savor, and allow ourselves to mindfully enjoy all those little things, like the mom picking up her kid from childcare, to just enjoy her kid's smile, to enjoy his hug, to enjoy his funny jokes, right? To be in the moment enough to actually pick up on these little cute gifts, right, that are being offered her in that moment. Okay. The L and the A, let go, right? You have to let go of past worry or past problems, future worries. You have to let go of distractions, put that phone down and focus, right, on the person, on nature, on your pet, to fully overlap with them. Full attention, right? Once you let go of all these distractions, then you can fully be in that moment with that person, and it will be a very different experience, right? I'm sure you've noticed that when you're not fully there, when you are fully there, how different it can be. I do clinical work, and in counseling, it's critical, right? If you're not fully present, fully listening, people notice, and they don't share the same things. You don't have the same rapport. It's critical, okay? Action, right? So it's not just enough to be mindful and observe, then you have to interact. You have to do things in this relationship. You have to participate. You have to put your full self in. If you have a child, right, get down on the floor, wrestle with them, play soccer with them. If you have a pet, play a game, teach them tricks. If it's nature, go walk through it, touch and feel and smell, like participate in a relationship with that living thing. Proximity really matters too, right? If we're too distant, if we're way back, it's not the same. Jane Goodall had this experience when she first started looking for the chimpanzees. She couldn't find them, right? So she didn't get much reward at all out of that experience. And then she found them through her binoculars, but she couldn't get close, and she hardly learned a thing about them. But finally, with patience, they allowed her to enter their family, their community. And when she was sitting with them, right next to them, she discovered just a wealth of knowledge about these primates. They allowed her to hold their infants, right? And they would comb her hair, and it was just this, she just kept going back the rest of her life because it was just this intimate encounter that only happened with the right proximity, where she could learn and enjoy that to the fullest. Intensity is another one, and by this I mean like pace. We have to adjust our pace so we can connect with other living things. Again, if you go back to a kid, if they're hyper in the morning, you may have to pick up your pace to run along with them and play games. If they're more tired at night, maybe then you can sit down and play a board game or read a book. We have to adjust our pace to meet other people where they're at. Okay. And then reciprocity. We need to receive by net. It's kind of like a fishing net. You want to receive all that's being given you in that moment, right? Like be in the moment enough to receive maybe the wisdom that's being shared, the kindness, pick up on that, the beauty that's being offered you. And then give, right? You want to be empathic enough to understand the needs of that living thing so you can give to it as well, the best of yourself, to fully provide all that you have to that other. And when you do all these things, I can promise you, it will be different, right? And you've had these moments where it was almost an experience of awe, like, wow, I live in a world that's so beautiful, with other living things that I've been missing, right? I've been maybe passing by, or I've been that I've been missing, right? And wow, like what an amazing thing to wake up and realize I'm surrounded by abundance, I'm surrounded by beauty, and just the awe that comes to us. And it can be life, it can transform our lives, it really can. And so this is the invitation, if you want to advance again. Look around you today, tomorrow, the rest of your life, find living things that maybe you've been missing, find that old man on the bench, and go talk to him, go sit by him for a second, right? open up and follow those ingredients, those overlapping ingredients. See if you can add as many of those to your recipe as possible and see what comes of it, right? Overlap with your family, your friends, your pets, with nature, get out and see some of this beauty around us. You can overlap with food, right? Think of the different textures and the flavors, experiment with that a bit. With wisdom, get into the arts, science, music, literature. There's just so much, right? You can connect with the author as you really are mindful and overlapping with their material. It's amazing what, the experiences you can have there too. So quick, am I gonna be okay if I talk for a couple more minutes? Okay, well, let's keep going until someone tells me to quit. So there's a few laws of overlap. The more you value living things, the more living things you have to overlap with. Like, I didn't think birds had any value a few years ago. They were just shadows in trees. I could care less. And then I had a friend who introduced me to birding and a nice camera with zoom so you could actually see them up close. And I was like, wow, like there is value in those shadows. Like there's colors and beauty and texture and design and these amazing behaviors and these abilities. Once I actually studied them, they can fly across entire oceans and incredible memories in some cases. And now like birds are so living to me. Like anytime I see a bird, I'm like, whoa, what is that? What kind of bird is it? What are its special abilities? What are its superpowers? And it's just enhanced my life. Now when I go on a walk, like I feel like I'm on some safari in Kenya because there's all these living things to appreciate now that I was missing because I just didn't value them. Okay. Another law is to, to try to identify things that are more living, right? So what has more life? Sometimes we spend hours. We know that our teenagers are spending 7, 8, 9 hours on social media with a device, with an object in their hand that's not actually very living. In and of itself, it's fairly dead, right? So maybe they could put that down, or we could put it down because we maybe spend similar amounts of hours, and we could go connect with an actual living thing, like a real person in real time, and give them a hug and talk to them and play with our pet. These things that offer so much more life than a device that's so limited, in so many ways. Okay. And then engage a little more deeply. There's things that are living that we've been passing by that we could overlap with at a deeper level. I was in Yellowstone at this lake under the Grand Tetons, and we were just driving by the water, and we saw this ramp. We were with some friends, and we thought, never driven into the water on a bike, down a ramp. I wonder what happens when you do that. And so we decided to overlap with the water more deeply, and we drove down, and lo and behold, it was pretty cool. These, wings of water flew up, and at some point it slows you down and flips you over the handlebars. And, it's silly. You don't have to do that to overlap, but why not? Why not try to overlap more deeply with things that you haven't enjoyed yet because you haven't tried to engage with them deeper? And then diversity, right? The more types of living things we find overlap with, that adds just even more richness. So find new people to get to know, find new foods to try, find new literature you've never experienced. I'm in a book club with Josh, and I've been exposed to all these books I never would have read, but in this book club, someone says, let's try this book. And I'm like, okay. And it's been richly rewarding to overlap with more material. And so here's your challenge. Look around you, find living things, and see if you can engage at a deeper way. That's really all it takes. And I believe through the science of a decade of studying this that this is the key to happiness. This is the active mechanism, right? And doing this will result in great joy, meaning, and life satisfaction. Thanks so much.